Yeah. And
All right.
which is what? About that much.
It is 1 o'clock and we are here for a workshop on our A budget. With that, HR has a whole bunch of paper over there.
Do. So I'm not sure what direction the board wants to take, but again, I want to present you with what benchmark positions we have for you. I don't have copies for everyone.
No, you're fine.
We can share one.
So what you have in front of you are our
Can we give her the microphone, Jason?
Yeah, I just keep what they just gave it.
You're just holding on to it for dear life.
So what you do have in front of you is our benchmarking results and our proposed changes for certain positions. Not all positions were benchmarked this year, just the ones that have, or what we identified as having a high turnover. Also, ones that specifically were asked from departments for us to reassess. Our proposals are on the right. And then there's a continuation of this information on page 2. The comparable data was pulled from Ada County, Spokane County, Nez Perce County, Leda County, Kootenai, Blaine, Valley, Twin Falls, Bannock, Bonneville, City of Post Falls, City of Sandpoint, City of Coeur d'Alene, and Milliman in Inland Northwest Survey.
So is this an average of all those counties?
So if you look at, for clerk 1, the first one there, it will show Bonner County hourly, the range, minimum, midpoint, and maximum. And then you have the comparison average, and then we have the proposed new hourly for that position. So on your right, our recommendation shows that we're proposing moving that grade. Currently, the court clerk sits at a grade 5. So our proposal based on the data is for them to be moved up to a grade 6.
So if I can piggyback on Commissioner Corn's question, I think I have the same question. Is the hourly comparison average, is that an average of all of the comparable counties and other municipalities listed, or does
Yes,
that depend on the position?
all the
Okay,
counties,
so
right.
For each comparison, it's an average of all of those other counties and or municipalities.
Correct. No.
Can I ask how you came to select the counties that you gave for comparison? What was the rationale that you used for those?
So we use job description comparisons, as well as we would look at if the amount was too high or too low and just not comparable. We didn't include it.
You did that on a case by case, not necessarily county by county, but you did that on office or department. So if you thought one department from Ada County was too high, you just didn't include that?
So can I ask a question on some of our job descriptions or positions are very different from some of these counties? So when I look at our parks and waterways versus something like Ada County, it's like not comparable. It's the same title, but it's not like the program. Was there an adjustment to recognize those differences? Because that's one of those departments where it's very different. Can I ask, and only on this one, I think you guys did a good job first, I'll say, but there are people that don't talk very much in the county, but equally feel like they're not represented. So when it comes to maintenance and housekeeping, did we take a look at those functions in our county? Because not to carry water for Teddy, but I know this has come up over maintenance, rate of pay, and do they need another person, and doing comparison. And I do see that you did GIS, because they're also a group where they have sometimes been left behind. So, and not just, and I guess my point is, I don't want to just look at the people that squeak the loudest. I want to make sure we're representing the group that, when we moved from step and grade, there was a very clear statement made to members that we knew some people weren't going to be shifting, and I don't want to leave those people behind still. So how are we going to address that? And I don't know if the prior person had like a something that gave some plan of how are we going to make it right. And I say that, and I'll use GIS as the example, because that group was supposed to get a rate increase for a couple of years, and they just didn't complain to us, and then we ended up doing it. And that's just not fair, and I don't want to do that. And I think this go-round, people are looking for to be pulled up for those that didn't get pulled up. Does that make sense? And I don't know what Alicia left behind.
Right, and I think it's just a matter of probably communicating with department heads as to how they want to move forward in, and I don't want to point, but her specific for Teddy, I know that she had some concerns about certain positions, so she approached us and we reassess or assess that particular position. So I think it's just a matter of, if a department head has a want, just to approach us and we can reassess or move forward with that need.
Because I would like, and I think it's, for our county, it should be that we're following our policy regarding assessing the rates, because it shouldn't depend on the director saying, hey, I think we're underpaid. We should be doing it, because our policy requires us to grab that data and to annually assess where people are getting paid. And arguably, we have to shift away from people just changing job descriptions, because when someone makes their own job description outside of what we're using when we're doing our benchmarking, it's not necessarily comparable. But I know that maintenance for the last 2 years has said that they have needs that we're not expanding, but we're adding like more buildings. And in some ways, and I'll say, Teddy, correct me if I'm wrong, they're being asked to do a little bit more in terms of building than what I would typically see in just maintenance. And I think that also has to be accounted for. And I'll be honest, I'm trying to pay attention to people that were left behind. I think we left quite a few people behind when we shifted with this that we need to address. And I think GIS I'm glad to see them there. I think that they're pulled up now that we fixed that the last time.
I know that, I don't know how the budget process was done last year, I wasn't part of that, but I know that this year we had been encouraging departments, if they were wanting to specifically address an employee as far as moving him up a step or two, to include that in their enhancements. And then once we had received that, we actually did an equity on that specific person to determine where they would appropriately fall.
Prosecutor's office is a big problem, and I see we didn't do anything on law enforcement. Did we feel did you guys look at law enforcement?
We did.
Were they?
They had specific needs as far as a particular employee, so we did equities on several of the sheriff's office employees separately, not their positions, but actually an employee. We did that separately.
For them, they often compare their office to Kootenai County, and we're not going to be in line with I think we're $11 an hour behind Kootenai County, but that making sure that we address that. I have one of my big concerns are professional license holder requirements, because prosecutor's office is behind, and it's a license requirement, and we're losing people. We'll lose another one at the end of this month, and so it isn't enough to have some of their rates haven't been adjusted, and I know that the community has made a comment about a percentage increase in their office, but in part, there hasn't been an adjustment, and we need lawyers, and we're leaking lawyers from their office. I did talk to Lewis about that, and we're gonna have a meeting on what to do, because he's losing another criminal lawyer at the end of this month.
I may have missed this, but for the departments that are not in the spreadsheet, is that because there was not a specific request made?
Right. But our data show that they are comparable to other counties.
So they're not included because
And
you were
this-
not recommending a change.
Correct.
And then for some of the ones that are in here that are included, but you're also not recommending a change, they're included because there was a request to review. I believe you said it, I just want to make sure I'm clear as to what data was presented and why certain data is not included.
So when you're calling something office manager, is that not just a job? And I know we had this before, I think it happened with solid waste, where solid waste posts a job and it's the same job for a different department, but the rate of pay is different based on the department. Isn't that what happened with us, between the two of us?
I think it's the job description though.
Yeah.
It's the job description.
So on this one you have, like when we say office manager, are we saying that there's a different rate depending on what department they worked in for the functions?
Yes.
I'm still unclear on how this whole thing was put together. I'm unclear why you decided to use Ada County for certain departments and not others. And why not just exclude them altogether? Why not just use something more local or pick a couple counties that are more comparable to ours and use them across the board? It seems to me like picking and choosing. I'm not sure how reliable that data is. If I'm looking at every department individually and then comparing it to every county that's listed here, and if I see a county that is exceptionally high or exceptionally low, I'm guessing, I choose to kick it out, but the difference isn't so much on a different department, so I decide to use it. So then to me, it's more along the lines of whoever's putting this together. To me, when we talk about data, the data seems to be manufactured more so than just real data. It's probably not coming across the way I want to, but.
I think, I think that was kind of my concern on the counties that were chosen, because we are very different in size than like in Ada County. And so although I understand saying the job description might match for Ada County, is that representative of North Idaho rates of pay? And so I think that's kind of where you're going, is how do you pick and choose which county that you're looking at? And I guess I kind of have the same question as to geographically, kind of some of the complaints people make is we're going to lose to Kootenai County, or we're going to lose to a county that's close to us. So what's the reason to not use, for example, the top 5 northern counties as a rubric, because that's within the geographic area, and that they're more similar with some fluctuations for size like a Kootenai County, but a balance with using like Nez Perce because they are, more similar in size to us. Versus when we go down to Twin Falls and Bonneville and Ada, that's all southern. And so those rates of pay are going to come back a lot higher with resumes that sometimes are also different. And so I would like to see kind of the data that shows which counties are reporting what, because this can look like it's just a complete increase on all of them when we throw in something like Ada County. And that doesn't mean these don't deserve the increase. It's that, are we using the right compare contrast to ensure? And for the comparison, we're using a lot of the people that are mid and southern Idaho. Is that kind of what you're trying, the
It is. We're not
integrity
going to
of the
lose any
data?
employees to Ada County unless they want to live in the city. And then it's not going to be strictly monetarily driven. It's
Yeah.
going to be because that's where they want to live. I don't think we're going to lose any employees to Spokane per se. You could make a lot more in Spokane, yes, but people don't want to drive that far, or they don't want to live in Spokane. They don't want to live in Washington. So therefore, they're going to accept the pay decrease to work here. I could see a valid point for arguing where are we, or where could we lose our employees? Kootenai County would be a great place to lose employees. It's close enough. Depending on the pay, I might think about commuting. Boundary County, same thing. Boundary County actually has a more rural, remote landscape to live in, and that appeases many people, but their hourly rate of pay, I'm going to guess, is lower than ours. So I'm not sure. I think we should be looking at where we could lose our employees. And
I agree. We tried to gather as much data as we possibly could. And unfortunately, there's not a lot up in our area. And even if we looked at the top 5 northern counties, maybe 1 or 2 of them might have the same position that's comparable to what we're trying to find. So Ada in general is just, they pay more. Blaine pays more. But there were certain positions where they were comparable to us, and there are certain positions where they were actually lower than us. So we chose the ones that were comparable, that fit with what we were looking for, and compared those.
And to my point, that's manufacturing the data. If you follow what I'm trying to say, when you're picking and choosing and not using it across the board, if it came close to what we're paying, we decide to use it. But if it's one extreme or the other, up or down, we kick it. So we have a human factor involved in putting this data together now instead of across the board. That's my issue.
And I think, I hear what both of you are saying. You're trying to fill the gap for what data wasn't there. But I actually agree that if we're comparable to Kootenai County, then we compare to Kootenai County and put that, not compare where it works for us, because I think that's where people feel there's inequity in what we're doing. So why not select the counties that are more reasonable to Bonner County? And then when you come up with the job description that doesn't exist, then that's where we would have to do what's the closest to it, and then the adjustment, because I think, I don't think I can say that it's true to say, choose what we liked from each of them, when what we're really trying to address is, where's the leakage of staff from Bonner County? I agree that it's likely if someone is going to Ada County, it has nothing to do with us, they're going to Ada County. But as with most people compare to is, who's going to Kootenai County? That is reasonable to compare to, even though we know there's going to be ups and downs. But I kind of agree that why not pick the counties that impact our footprint?
And if there is no data, how would you like us to present that?
Well, there's other ways to look at that. So, for example, like I'm going to use our Parks and Waterways program is not the same as another park and waterway. So we have to actually do a little bit more manual work on something like that to find what's reasonable based on what we're offering, but not just taking it as whoever had it available to give to us is the information we're going to accept, but that this might be a one-off that we have to create and find a way that we say this one is going to have an asterisk, and we're going to say we couldn't find anything comparable in the top 5 counties, so we're going to use, for example, whatever county mirrored it, say Nez Perce mirrored it, we're going to use theirs, but these are the functions within this job description that weren't the same, and this is the added value adjusting for the difference in location, versus just saying, because the top 5 may not have that we're going to use the one from a county that is very different from us, depending on who it benefits.
So, do you guys use a market location adjustment if, say, we're in a very different market, such as, in the Ada County area? If that's where you could find the closest parallel job description, if you were looking at that, is there some type of an adjustment factor based on what rates and cost of living looks like in that location as compared to our geographic location?
No, we haven't used that in the past. And I understand your concerns and the points that you just brought up, but this was the direction that we were given as a whole. So moving forward, if the board wants us to address things in a different way, we certainly can, but this was the direction that we were given prior to starting this process.
By
the prior director.
Oh, okay.
Okay, HR director.
Correct.
Okay.
So maybe we can ask the board this question, maybe takes, when you're looking at benchmarking, instead of trying to hand pick it, I favor the idea of using the top 5 northern counties because that's what impacts us. We don't have that much different, we have more climate similarities for that. Does the board have an issue with using the top 5 northern counties that are in our region for that compare contrast and then addressing those job descriptions that are not found within that footprint as a one-off?
I think it might be more accurate if we were to do that.
I think that should be our primary target. I think it's important to also include Monterey and Spokane County because the proximity means that we are also in competition in those geographic markets. And we may have to, again, apply some type of an adjustment factor in that consideration. But we have staff who come from those locations and we are competing for jobs from the same pool of people in that geographic location. So I think we have to factor that in as well.
I agree that especially when you're in Southwest Bonner County, the distance to go to Coeur d'Alene to Spokane to here is actually the same. It's not, especially when you factor in, and we actually have employees that live in Spokane but work here. And so I think that it would be reasonable to give the asterisk for the outside so that we can look at what market adjustment you would have to give. But as you look for some of these specialized roles, sometimes you are going to go farther from our footprint to find that person. So I think those two should be included outside of the top 5 because we do.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, there was a disconnect from the prior HR director to what this board is discussing. Unfortunately, there wasn't a conversation between that director and this board that I know of. I thought our current written policy talked about the geographic market. So I'm a little surprised that the prior director suggested going so far afield geographically, but it is what it is and we'll figure out how to adapt. But
I would like to ask if we do include Monterey County and Spokane County, if we could average those two counties and put an asterisk by it so we know that number is coming from the state of Washington, so that we might be able to make a better decision. I just don't want certain departments that might really ramp up the average cost.
Spokane is higher than Ponderay. You get more money in Spokane than you do in Ponderay. I think that to address what your concern is, I think we have to identify those comparisons that come out of there. But Spokane will be more money than Bonner County for most things and for Ponderay. Spokane competes with Kootenai more reasonably. The rest of us don't really compete. It's really who's willing to make that drive, essentially is what kind of breaks that tie. Spokane will drive our market up so with Kootenai County. I don't think you can take that average because people reasonably choose to come here for reasons and people reasonably choose to leave. And I say here, I'll pick Sandpoint because it's like in the middle. They move from Sandpoint to Spokane for rates of pay. And vice versa. So I think that number is a valid representation of how we're positively and or negatively impacted. Like we have people in our law enforcement and emergency management that prefer the Idaho policy and they can't go to Kootenai because Kootenai, for example, on EMS, they combine fire and EMS, so they don't like that. So their next spot is to come to us. But if we were to change our procedure, then they'd probably get pushed back down to their geographic location because the drive isn't worth the exchange of the benefit. And there are jobs where that exists. All of healthcare will do that to this county. This county will never pay enough in healthcare compared to Kootenai and Spokane. So
What kind of,
she had the clerk's office, and then I know you raised your hand. I saw you.
so to look at all of these positions again, comparing it to the 5 northern counties, what kind of timeline would HR need before you could present that back to the commissioners?
I would say a week at least. We already have a lot of it, and we did actually look at Ponderay County, which was substantially lower in all positions that we looked at, but Spokane was substantially higher in a lot of positions, and Boundary tends to be lower as well. And with the 2 lower counties in there, it does skew the average.
you have to resort the data, which I know is going to take time.
But Those lower counties matter still though, because this is where we end up, and then I'll go to the law. That's why we have a lawyer that's driving the boundary, because they are increasing their rates on some of those professional licenses, which is causing a drain on us, because one of the things that I worry about with this is as they keep inflating their attorney positions because they can't find someone, they'll pull it from us because they keep inflating their number, which is why we have that agreement of allowing some people to toggle between the two counties. And that, so we have to look at boundary, because equally we will be able to pull people from boundary to our area. And so I don't think that it's not skewed data, it's accurate data of what is available in our area, because a lower rate of pay in boundary means we become attractive so long as gas prices are reasonable for the travel.
Yeah, the way I guess I perceive it is, I understand from a pure raw data perspective, it seems like we're skewing the numbers. But I think it's the reality of the complex market condition that we're in, because we have all these surrounding counties, and the environment they offer and the rate of pay are so dramatically different depending on where you go, that we have this challenge of trying to figure out how to find a balance between all of that. So I want to restate what's been stated, that I appreciate the work that's gone into it. Sorry for any disconnect, but I think we're going to be able, as a county, to make better decisions if we parse the data down a little bit more to our geographic region and figure out what those challenges look like. And then with the updated values, it could be then or it can be now, if you could also explain, please, for any proposed new hourly rates, what process did you use to come to that conclusion? Is it a simple percentage? Is there something else that you're using to come to that number?
So
that
these are
value?
just the wages for the next grade up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Can we include the Teddy's people in this assessment? Is there, I'd like to see that, because we have, that has not moved at all, and we have been, I would like to make sure that that's right, especially considering what their job has changed to, because he's doing more than just maintenance. We're actually having a little bit of some construction stuff going on, and that's very different than what I think and I know I'm speaking to one person, but that's a big difference in a job that we really haven't changed much, but we have actually increased the footprint of what needs to be worked on with this new building and how we're moving work around in that department. And I'd like to look at, I don't want people to get left behind, because I know people expect to be pulled up this go-round. And so, road and bridge.
I just wanted to point out Ada County, a lot of that was kind of my doing with the loss director,
We're used to
with
it.
HR.
Always road and bridge.
I wanted to state, well, I'm gonna say it because it's the truth. The fact of the matter is, when you start comparing the 5 northern counties, it doesn't work for road and bridge because they're not set up like counties. They're independent highway districts. They're much smaller. They're dealing with a quarter of the miles that we deal with. And when you look at somebody like Boundary County, they're set up like we are, except for their mileage is not even the size of one of my districts. So when we start looking at the population that we're serving here, the roads that we're serving, the people that we're serving, and the amount of work that we have to do, Ada County is a closer comparison on a lot of our backcountry roads that we deal with versus somewhere like Cooney County that has 7 different independent highway districts within it that have a quarter of the mileage with almost double the budget that we do. So it's a different comparison. So
I think
we're
you are
not
different.
in here. I just wanted to put that out there because
He's always different.
it is different.
No, and-
We
but
need
I
to
don't think
compare
you're
with
wrong.
Counties that are similar to what Bonner County is.
I don't think you're wrong. I just think that the whole county doesn't shift for road and bridge. I think road and bridge
I
has to
agree
be a
with
standalone with a comparison that's like for like. And the argument of the way in which Road and Bridge operates being compared to Ada County is more reasonable than the top 5 because it's not, we don't operate the same with respect to Road and Bridge. Not everybody has that. But I think that's where HR has to carve you out for that comparison and equally look at like for like in terms of the way that program runs and what their expectations are. I do think that's different, but I don't think the whole county should shift to Ada for Road and Bridge. I think Road and Bridge has to be compared to not just Ada County, that, because there's more than Ada
Yeah,
County
we had
that's like that.
multiple
You have
counties that we
multiple
were compared
counties,
to.
and it should be similar to what the, kind of like job scope of Road and Bridge. I don't disagree, I just don't
But
think the
I
county
just wanted
works
to
for
put
you.
that out there, that I'm pretty certain that's why Ada County was on there, because we kind of triggered a lot of this.
But I want to be careful too. I think it needs to focus more on the roles and responsibilities of the positions.
Yeah.
And not on the structure of the department. You know, the miles of road and all that, that's a different consideration than the actual roles and responsibilities and pay level to perform a task and do, complete a, position. So, Jason, do you know if ITD for the northern region could be something to also look at, or?
Yeah, so we've lost people to ITD, and ITD's lost people to us. We're real comparable.
Because to me, that seems like our competitive market, because from a structure perspective, what you guys do, you do things and train staff to a level and expect performance of tasks
Yeah.
that are greater than a lot of these smaller highway districts like you're talking about. So that's where I could see maybe a parallel with ITD. And then if we look at the northern region, then we're also geographically
Yep.
hunting
And we
for the
did
same
use
staff.
ITD in
and-
there as well
Okay.
when we did ours. Ours isn't listed on here except for one position, but.
That was my thought as well. It's not the organization, it's the labor that we're talking about. And a grader 2 operator is a grader 2 operator. I'm gonna guess, no matter what county you're in, that you've got that certain level that you have to rise to in order to get that. So, I don't want to compare organizations to organizations because they have less roads or more roads. Someone
Well,
that
it's a
is.
complete difference. You're not, when you look at the budget, we can't even compete with CUNY County on some of their stuff, and they're smaller mileages, but they have a lot bigger budget.
I
We're not
think
talking
that,
about budget,
I know,
are
but
we?
I think that
Yeah.
you guys are saying the same thing, but from different angles. So there is an element that is the comparing highway districts and size that do come in at the program itself that will impact rates of pay. But that doesn't mean that that's all that you're doing. So what you're both saying is, it's not, you won't get rid of the top 5 northern county impact. ITD will be a good rubric, and then your Ada County comment is the size and the scope of work does impact in terms of kind of the attraction of our area, but it's not the end-all be-all to Road and Bridge for us. And so I think everybody's on the same level of using that as a rubric, but just not the whole county compared to that. And that you agreed that you used ITD, but
Yeah.
our leakage of our staff is to the top 5 northern counties. It isn't going to be to Ada, but you're wanting to,
Most
Look
of
at
my
the program
linkage is to the
comparison.
private sector, to be honest. You know, I mean, that's where we lose most of our employees. We're a great college.
Yeah, you
Equipment
train them well.
operators. They come in, we train them, they go make twice as much money. And that's just the way the county's always been.
well, and maybe that's an element that has to get pulled into the cost of, there are ones where private sector is more beneficial, especially when you consider, and I'll put this shameless plug of, being in an organization that doesn't offer retirement plans or matching. It
Right.
does, that the private sector does come into play of what am I getting in the long run? And I'm gonna say we have to look at that aspect in terms of benefits, but I think for Road and Bridge, that is leakage to the private sector, and I think maybe that's what you have to identify is, what are the companies that people tell you that they're going to, and maybe that's what we compare to see how are we competitive with that. Where we are failing in comparison is those 401ks, the way in which you retire from a county. We don't
Yes.
have something like that.
Exactly.
And we have to, as a county, take a real look at that, because it is, I mean, I messaged Kevin, I said, do we even do Roth IRAs? Do we do anything like that, that people can participate in long range? And that's not what we're doing. And so in some regards, if we're not going to do that, people are going to look to be paid more in their salary so that they can, save for retirement? Or do we look at offering things like that, that pulls people away from the county to private sector? Private sector advertises a full package.
Well,
Would
I
it be
definitely,
fair to include independent highway districts with your department, with like Kootenai County and stuff, as far as comparisons?
To do what now, sorry?
To include the independent highway districts such as.
You can include them,
Kootenai.
but it's not gonna be an apples for apples.
I don't think so.
I know it's not, because I've already done it.
So, but we should say then, let's not include them, because we don't want bad advice. He's asking your advice as the expert. And if you say no because it's not a true comparison,
It isn't a true comparison. Most of the people I do lose my people to is the locals that are right here within Bonner County. I'm losing them to the contractors, right?
so that's what I think
It
we need
is
to
what it
assess.
is when it happens. Since they changed the federal regulations when it come to getting a CDL, it changed everything. So they're in high demand. They're hard to get. So everybody's coming after them and paying good money to get them.
And I just want to be careful that we don't unintentionally put blinders on and say that we're only competing with other government employers, because we're competing with the private sector for a lot of our positions.
We are.
I know we have some that are unique to government, but I'd say the vast majority, in my opinion, are not. And so we have to acknowledge that reality, that we're competing with the private sector in this geographic market.
Well, back in the day when we were for cause, that was a completely different deal. It was a lot harder to get rid of somebody if they got into a government position. But right now, you're at will. You're not much different than any other private entity, and that's the way the guys look at it. So they're like, well, we're at will. We're gonna go over here and make $40 an hour, and you guys can have fun with that. And I can't blame them. I'm like, I wish them the best, and they go do it. They're truck drivers for Peak are making more than some of my foremen, so it is just what it is. And they're just.
But they don't get to drive a plow truck in the winter with a 12-foot blade working
Yeah.
for Peak.
Yeah.
can on technology trend as we move into AI, are we seeing, did you guys see like a lot of variation in that, or did we not look at that much? Because I know I see GIS is on here, but not technology. We have lost and are losing people in IT right now. Was that reviewed, and is
No,
that
I think that's
something?
probably one of the departments that will reassess, not I'm sorry.
IT.
Technology.
I think that's one that we need to look at, because as AI has come out, I think there's been a huge shift, and we are, within just 1 year, losing 1 to 2 potentially people.
Not necessarily due to pay, though.
Well, it was pay and opportunity. So it was, and I think that has to be part of your calculation, is what is your growth opportunity? And so having had an opportunity to speak to the person that left, that's part of what people look for. Sometimes you'll drop back a little bit so that you can have more growth opportunity. And I think we have to be mindful of the types of positions that do that in an organization. And ones that require technical skills.
How come we didn't add the sheriff's department?
We did benchmark that, we just didn't bring proposals.
Okay.
And then,
There's a lot of high and a lot of low in that. There's a lot of spread in those rates of pay that I think we have to look at too.
so as we go forward, what tool are we going to use? And I'm looking at the auditor. What tools are we going to use, auditor and clerk, for evaluating these proposed changes against the overall budget? How are we going to look at that data?
Our biggest problem is we need that insurance quote to know what our.
Yeah, it's a big part of it. I mean, I've HR helped, right? So within the projection on their end, they were able to, as amazing as this sounds, click a button and see what the cost would be if we did a single step increase for everybody in the county. So we have that kind of general big round number. I also took last year's total salary budget and added 3% to kind of see if you guys were leaning towards more of a COLA approach, if we're able to, what that would look like. So I do have those kind of rough costs. A step increase is going to be just under 700,000 across the board, and 3% would be about 900. So just to have kind of in the back of your minds, our total salary and benefit budget last year was right about 28 million. That's for everybody but EMS.
So I appreciate the direction it's going in, and I think with making those adjustments, that'll be really helpful.
How
I know we
would
still have
the-
moving parts that we need to fill in the puzzle, but
Well, I just know we're running out of, I mean, we're not running out of time, but we're getting closer and closer to the wire. So if their direction is to reevaluate these comparisons using the 5 northern counties, unless there is not a position and they're asterisking it for you,
5+2.
when would, 5+2, when would you guys, so they said they're gonna need about a week. Would you be comfortable with us scheduling another meeting next Thursday if there's availability? And then kind of going position by position and either approving the change for next fiscal year or not, so that then we can start building what that's gonna look like?
I don't think we can approve the change until we know what
The
our
cost.
flexibility is.
What the overall
And so
budget looks
our
like.
overall budget. And so I think that, and you guys correct me, and it could be because I'm meeting fatigued, but why can't you guys just email us a spreadsheet and then we ask our questions? If we've given the direction that we want to use top 5 northern counties plus Ponderay and Spokane, addressing the one-offs with Road and Bridge, although I'll say, as a disclaimer, I don't know if much effort needs to be put in Road and Bridge because we did all of that last
Yeah.
budget. And so I think that you guys are solid, so we don't have to put that on their plate, especially when we look at timing, because that's one area that Jason micromanages. But if we did that, emailed it, then we can digest that without a whole meeting and then have our conversations once we get that. And by that time, we should have some indication of where we're sitting with ICRIMP. And then I will reach out to Jordan Redmond about, because we're looking first dollar in both, to see where our estimations, and then, because what you're wanting us to do is to lock it in so we can have a proposed, and in terms of moving, and we can't commit to moving, because if we say,
Yeah.
let's move, and then we don't have any money, then it's who are we moving for? And so we can't do both at the same time.
I do think some of the positions on that list were compared to other positions that were similar within our own county, and there was still compression and/or inequity. So I think that there could be maybe some different components to that, but I'm happy
And I equally
to.
know that we have to address the problem with the prosecutor's office, and we have them scheduled next week to address their changes are available within their own budget that won't actually impact us.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to help them stop losing their attorneys because they haven't changed. But does that suggestion address your issue of, we don't need to schedule a meeting? If they deliver the information to
Yes,
copy us all, and then, I'll see you.
Yep.
I see you a lot. I come
Yep.
up there a lot. And then we can have those discussions, and then after we get an idea, after ICRIP will be here on the 7th, after they leave, I will be calling, saying, okay, give me an estimate of what it's gonna look like, because that's what we're really looking for.
Right. I think that would be that'd be easy for all of us to do. I think the reason we've been doing this is you just wanted it on Zoom. And so it wouldn't be on Zoom if you do that. People wouldn't be able to see it. But they'll still see the ultimate, as we continue to grind, that one micro step won't be seen.
Before we
Once
make
we
a
get to the
decision.
point of deciding, that'll 100% be on Zoom in that discussion. But all the little in-betweens, we don't need to slow down progress, because HR deserves credit for, we're making decisions on how the staffing is going to change, but they've been doing this without someone who's there in charge saying what to do. They're just doing what they were told to do from prior. So hopefully you don't see this as a knock on work that you guys presented. You guys did what someone told you to do, and you did a good job at what you were told to do. You did exactly what you were told to do. And then right now, it's just a question of have a little bit of a shift.
I will say for the rest of the board's just awareness that as we have more of the budget information in front of us, to to determine whether or not it's viable. I am very much in favor of looking at a 3% COLA. I just, with the way the realities of inflation, that doesn't actually address true cost of living. But I think we're doing a disservice to our employees if we're not trying to make that happen on top of other considerations. So to me, that's kind of a foundational piece that I want us to consider. But we have to have the numbers in front of us to do the evaluation. But I feel strongly about pursuing that.
I don't disagree about cost of living adjustments. I will throw out there that there were people that were left behind
Yep.
and they have not been moved into, so if I'm not at the correct step and a cost of living increase happens, I'm still not getting what I should
Right.
get for my job.
Right.
And I want to first priority address those people that did not move, because they have, every year that you're not paid what you're worth and we just 3% you, that's actually money that you're losing. And I will say it was heartbreaking on the GIS one, because they knew it and they didn't say anything about it. And it was a year after year. And they got a 3%, but their 3% didn't cover the fact that they got 3% on a lesser amount of money due. And so I agree with the idea of what you're saying, but knowing that there are people that were left behind while other people some people got pushed farther than they should have been pushed, that we need to write that as a priority, because some people have dealt with it and not complained. And I think that was a lot of GIS, because I remember saying, why wouldn't you complain about that? And they just didn't.
Yeah, and I obviously, I'm not aware of the full history, but I agree. If we know there are people in the wrong place, we should correct it. So those are the other considerations in my mind. But outside of that, we have a significant reality of inflationary costs in our geographic area and our nation, and I don't want to ignore that as a base level of budget consideration.
I think that we might have some additional, my hope is that the changes in kind of how we're doing insurance will actually result in a little bit of freeing up of some funds that might help us get to there, especially as we change from not really carrying EMS by shifting our insurance and changing the mindset. I mean, when you think about the $700,000 about for your 3%, we spent that on litigation at the beginning of this year for unnecessary costs. And so it's not that we can't do it, it's that boards caused leakage out of the budget that didn't allow for it. I think that, I just want us to know that, from my view, there's a potential that the solution has to be that we raise people up to where they need to be, and that the COLA itself might be a few percentages lower in order to allow that increase. But I think we have to make sure we address those people that have been left behind.
Yeah, if we know there's a problem, we should correct it.
And I would agree on bringing people to the right position and the COLA. Because without human equity, what are we? The truck ain't going down the road.
Yep.
So
we run.
that's just my
Yeah.
my take, and I think that the human equity is more important than anything else.
Yeah, I think that this board has done a good job of removing the unnecessary litigation that has leaked out of the county budget, and I think that alone will allow for some adjustment. I think that has to be the continued commitment for any county, but specifically Bonner County, because every year we pay out a lot of money in litigation, which means we're taking that money away from that equity adjustment in rates of pay. And I think this has to be the start of a board that doesn't do that to the county. And that way we can help people to depend on available money. And to be honest, if that wasn't happening in the county, there would be an option to address 401ks and retirements. It's just we're putting the money in the wrong boxes every single budget cycle. And so people stay because they want to, but they're not planning a full retirement with us because we don't have that available to them. And when I look at people in the physical aspects of jobs in the county, you're not going to last to put your body to work for the county, till you're 65, 67, and it's not fiscally responsible for the county to do that either. We need to help people plan. We're not people with desk jobs.
Why are you talking to me?
Well, you started shaking your head and having a mood. But like when you look at Road and Bridge, our Road and Bridge group are dedicated workers, but they're older. And it's physical work, and it's getting, and, well, and the reality is the younger generation of people behind us, are they applying to work in physical labor jobs? No, they're not. And so your guys, and it happens with, like in a lot of jobs, they're working longer than their body wants them, because sometimes they say, I don't want to leave this person behind, or I don't want to create that gap. But then from a risk perspective from a county, that's a risk for increased injury, workers' comp, blah, blah, blah. And so there's more to look at. I think if we go next budget cycle, without getting sued, paying out at the beginning. I mean, we spent over $500,000 at the beginning, and that's what you're talking about was a 3% COLA. So I think this board has been good at falling on the sword just to not get sued. No,
Somebody give him the microphone.
he's,
So when we do our projection, should we go ahead and create a salary table with that 3% COLA in there, just so you know what's
I think
happening,
it'd
or
be
should
great
we,
to have
or
both
should we
based on
wait?
what the board has said.
Yeah.
With and without would be great.
Yep.
Thank you for
and
asking.
I think it's important that the community of employees knows that we're trying to make it right. So, we don't have any pending litigation right now. That would be a huge payout from the county, so knock on wood. So, no slip and falls are allowed either on the county property.
That's right.
Maybe we could take the money allocated
shoes.
for our assessor's drones and maybe move it into our COLA.
I'm not giving any comment.
Okay,
Anything further? Does that work for the clerk's office?
yes.
And I'm sure Road and Bridge will run over to HR and change whatever he wants to change.
I've already done it.
He's a standalone. So you didn't even need to comment on it.
I didn't need to, I just didn't feel
You just
like
can't
it
go
was
one
fair
meeting
not-
without using a
Not
microphone.
let them know that 80 county is
Okay.
kind of my fault.
So do we have a good
I'll
plan?
admit.
Thank you. All right, it is 1:53.